Hello, hello. Welcome to the party. Today, we're going to be talking about some more Diablo 4 stuff. I just started this channel, and I do not want it to be a Diablo 4 channel. However, Diablo 4 has been in the public eye so much outside of, real-life issues that are happening. It's legitimately difficult not to talk about. Eurogamer recently posted an article. They had an interview with some of the developers of the Diablo 4 team. So we're going to go ahead and cover that. And in order to do that, I'm going to switch my screen over. So, title of this article by the Eurogamer, beta has become a twisted word. Blizzard's response to Diablo 4 early access feedback. One of the things that they talk about is over 1 million people did log into the beta over the weekend. Now, going on from there, this was a natural segue, obviously, into talking about queue times. Rod Ferguson does mention is that some of those queue times actually may have been intentional. Now, I don't know how people are going to react to that. However, what he goes on to explain is that this was just essentially tweaking things. So they wanted to reduce loads on the server, to tweak things to ensure that those servers could host or continue to host a large amount of players. Even though they are coming out and explaining that some of those queue times were intentional, I think it was worth it in the long run, and I think it makes sense. At the end of the day, they didn't have a specific number of people who actually logged into the beta. They just know that it was over 1 million, and they ended up doing some really big hot fixes. We ended up doing 6 really big hot fixes that fixed dozens of issues. So we saw server stability come back up, the queues went down, and so we're feeling really good about that particular aspect. I think that's a big win in general. They go on and kind of talk a little bit about the upcoming open beta for next weekend. So for those of you who don't know, the first portion of the open beta was for those who pre-purchased the game. The next portion is going to be completely open to the public. So if you want to play Diablo 4 and you haven't yet, you will have the opportunity to do that. One of the specific things is that couch co-op has the ability to have individual menus pulled up. So, player 1 can have their inventory pulled up while player 2 is going off and exploring the world, vice versa. Now, I didn't play couch co-op for Diablo 3, but apparently there were a lot of issues there. Like if a player had a menu up, the other player had to sit and wait for that person to go through their menu. Specifically, the developers talk about how difficult it was playing with their teenagers and their kids because they would level up and they would want to completely respec their entire build, and it would take 30-45 minutes and you'd be falling asleep on the couch. I didn't know that was an issue. However, they have since then fixed that. So for anybody who's playing on console and you have, friends and family that come over and play with you, just know that you're going to have a lot more seamless experience doing couch co-op compared to Diablo 3. They also talk about whether or not right here, they also talk about whether or not the game or the split screen co-op or the couch co-op version of the game is coming to PC. And this is essentially what they say. They're not even sure if they can incorporate it onto PC. And so we're really up in the air right now in terms of whether or not it's coming down the line. Again, this is not something personally that I care about, but if you're someone out there who wants to set that up for your friends and family, sorry to disappoint, it probably won't happen based off of the limitations that PC has, specifically with building a couch co-op title. If they really, really wanted to, could they probably do it? Sure. But there's so many other things that they need to be focusing on. And I agree, right now, it's just not worth the time and effort for PC gamers. Another thing that they talk about is the butcher. Now, they don't talk about if the butcher is overtuned or anything like that, but what they do talk about is the idea of the butcher and what they want to incorporate into the game moving forward. The idea here is you're going on and you're doing your quest, you see a treasure goblin, and that changes the way that you play the game. They want to incorporate that same thing with the butcher, with some people on Reddit saying that the butcher is just a pissed off treasure goblin. One of the things that I really hope that they don't do with the butcher, however, is I hope that they don't nerf the butcher. Having that challenging enemy come at you and being stressed through surviving that situation, that is I love that in a game. Now, they also say here that they are going to incorporate other mobs that are very similar to the butcher in nature. I think that's awesome. I love that challenge. I think it brings a lot of different gameplay value to the game, and I hope that they only improve it and not take away from it. And for me, part of taking away from it is making it easier for people to get through. I don't want that. Next part of this article is the dungeon design of the game, and this is where, at least in, again, my opinion, we kind of start to get a little bit of tidbits in terms of what endgame might look like. So right now, the dungeons and the feedback is I really don't like the fact that I have to backtrack. Here's the thing, you guys, and I agree with the developer here. Sucks to suck. It's a Diablo game. It's an ARPG. That has always been a thing in these types of things. And so, I mean, if you really don't want to navigate back and forth, you're essentially taking up the mentality of a professional gamer, so learn those tile sets. People may not like that answer. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, dungeon crawling should not be a linear experience. It just shouldn't. Overall, just keep in mind that the first set of dungeons that you have here are, just the first level 25 levels. There are several other zones with their own set of dungeons and kind of unique experiences. But what they specifically kind of go over is the sigil system. So let me go ahead and see if I can find that real quick. And the way we want players to approach that as they are leveling up is to look at it as, I want to do each of these different dungeons. And that's incentivized through things like the Codex of Power and the Renown system that give you a sort of checklist for all the dungeons you can do. And then when you get into the end game, after you've completed the campaign and you get access to the Nightmare dungeon system, we have the sigils that modify the dungeons in really cool ways, with buffs and nerfs, and those dramatically modify the dungeon. But because the dungeons are designed with some properties to start with, you can get a sigil for a dungeon and have some context for what that means. It's not just a random name that can be anything. So to me, this is very similar to, and I haven't played Path of Exile in a while, but old school endgame Path of Exile. You go back into some previous, areas and you put some sigils in and you get buffs and nerfs and ailments and all that other fun stuff. And it changes not only what drops in that dungeon, but also not only what drops in that dungeon, but it also increases the chance of getting more rare items from that dungeon, right? I love this. I think this is great, and I'm excited to see how that whole system plays out and maybe potentially some other endgame systems that are coming down the line. And I do want to say, I hope that this is not the only portion of endgame. That would be really disappointing. I want there to be more for me to do at the end game, and if this is the only thing they've built and the only thing they plan on keeping, that would not be good. The next thing that they kind of talk about is the power of the classes. So for everybody who is living under a rock, it's been pretty well known at this point that Sorc, at least in the beta, is very overpowered, and Barbarian is not very great, and apparently Rogues fall somewhere in between. They basically ask, are you going to bring some balance to these classes as it relates to their power level? And these guys, they don't say yes or no, but they do imply that the game is working as intended. They essentially say, don't take the first 25 levels as the for sure kind of end result you will see with these classes. They go on to say, you might hit level 30 or 40 on Barbarian, and once you hit those levels, you become the most powerful class in the game. And although that's an obvious statement, I think most of us share, right? Like, we know that. We know that there are an additional X amount of levels that each of these classes are going to be able to take advantage of. Here's my argument to that, though. There shouldn't be a situation where one class gets more power spikes at the beginning and less at the end. That doesn't really necessarily make sense to me. I think things just need to be even. And I would be really surprised if they didn't have some sort of metric or number system that showed the output of damage per class at per level. They want people to play the fantasy, right? So you should play a Barbarian not because they're the strongest class in the game, but because you want to role play and experience the world as a Barbarian. I'm all about immersion, but like if you're gonna go in and you're gonna say, oh man, I want to play a Barbarian because Barbarians are sick, they're berserkers, they're in people's faces, but then a Sorc comes by and they do a chain lightning and they one-shot the enemy that you're currently trying to kill, that's going to take people out of the immersion. That's going to upset people. It's going to make people want to play mainstream meta, and it's going to drop the diversity of classes that we see in the world. You should be balancing things through all of the levels, especially at the very beginning. If you haven't played this beta and you go into it this weekend, play a Lightning Sorc and tell me you don't feel fucking ridiculously powerful. My general thoughts are this. I like that the developers are actively responding to people in this community. I like that they're being transparent. Again, coming out and straight up saying that they are intentionally putting queue times onto the servers to tweak some things so they know for a fact that those servers can manage the load. I think that's good. I don't have an issue with that. The ideas that they have with the Butcher, I love the fact that people are calling the Butcher a more pissed off treasure goblin, and I love the fact that they're going to put more mobs like that in the game. Again, my only critique there is I hope that they don't nerf the Butcher necromancer or those mobs. That challenge is fun. It's intense. I like that system. I hope that they if they do any tweaking, that it makes sense for that system, because killing those rare mobs that spawn that give you a hard time should be challenging, in my opinion, and they should be rewarding at the same time. The sigil system for the dungeons, great. We're finally starting to get an idea in terms of Diablo 4 and how it may play in the end game. Sounds like that they're taking some influences and inspiration from Path of Exile. Again, not a bad idea. I just hope that that's not the only thing that they have for endgame. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for a lot more there. And I can't wait to see how they expand that. Finally, the class balances. You can tell people, every day of the week, you should be picking this class for these reasons. At the end of the day, though, if one class is outperforming the other, the majority of people are going to say, I don't give a fuck about the fantasy, I just want to kill shit. Another thing that they brought up that I did not mention is in the next open beta this upcoming weekend, they are going to be releasing Necromancer and Druid, which is amazing. Anyways, that's everything that I wanted to talk about with everybody today. Are you excited for the release of Diablo 4? Are you excited for the upcoming open beta? Do you think that the idea of classes not being balanced to maintain the fantasy of that class is appropriate? I don't know. I'm just one guy, I'm just one guy who has an opinion on the internet. All right, I'm signing out. See ya.